Mi hijami de Joe en el hospital. Cuidaremos de tu mama. Pero 10 días después. They left me on a hospital bed for 10 days. No clean clothes. No phone call. No visit. And when I came home, they were already dividing up my things. My name is Saturnina. I am 74 years old. And I built everything I have with nothing but my hands, my stubbornness, and 40 years of refusing to quit. My husband left when my daughter Brenda was barely crawling, a man who was better company for a barstool than for his family. So I raised her alone. I built a fabric and sewing shop from a single rented counter with 2 bolts of cloth and a dream. I called it the Golden Button. It became the largest notions store in the neighborhood. I fed Brenda with that store. I clothed her. I paid for her university education. I paid for her wedding. I gave her and her husband Rogelio a place to live, temporarily, they said. That temporary arrangement lasted 5 years. I should have seen it coming. But love makes you blind. And mother love makes you the blindest creature on earth. It started on a gray Tuesday. The kind of day that gets into your bones. I was in the back of the store, up on a wooden stepladder, reaching for a box of antique lace I kept on the highest shelf. My ankle turned. Just slightly. Just enough. The step cracked and the world tilted and I fell the way old bones always fall. Badly, completely, without mercy. My hip hit the oak counter on the way down, and by the time I hit the floor, I heard the sound. A dry crack. The sound of my independence breaking. I screamed. Of course I screamed. Not from pain, from fury. Because I knew, in that exact moment, that my life was about to change. Brenda appeared within minutes. She lived upstairs. She came down with her phone in her hand, and when she saw me on the floor, surrounded by spools of thread that had scattered like confetti at a terrible party, her face did something that I will never forget. It didn't show panic. It showed calculation. A flash of something cold and opportunistic, just for a second, before she arranged it back into concern. Rogelio. Come down. Mama fell. In the car on the way to the hospital, they sat in the front together and whispered. Not crying. Not worried. Whispering. I could hear the tone even if I couldn't hear the words. It wasn't the tone of a frightened family. It was the tone of people making plans. The diagnosis was quick. Fractured hip. Surgery required. Absolute rest and rehabilitation. The young doctor explained everything while I lay there with painkillers starting to blur the edges of the world. That was when Brenda came to my bedside. She took my hand, the same hand that had wiped her tears, braided her hair, written her tuition checks, and she leaned in close. Don't worry about anything, Mama, she said, soft as silk. You stay here and rest. We'll take care of the house, the cats, the store, the accounts. Everything. You just heal. She kissed my forehead. Cold. Dry. The kiss of a woman saying goodbye to something that had already served its purpose. Then they left. I watched their backs disappear down the green corridor of the hospital and felt a pain in my chest that had nothing to do with my broken hip. The first 2 days I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Surgery recovery is disorienting. People get overwhelmed. By day 3, I borrowed the phone from a nurse named Gladys, a round-faced, warm-eyed woman who looked at me with a pity I was beginning to deserve, and I called Brenda. Voicemail. Called Rogelio. Voicemail. Called my own landline. It rang and rang until the line went dead. I told myself they were busy. The store needed managing. They were overwhelmed. I invented excuses the way you do when the truth is too ugly to look at directly. Day 5. Day 6. The woman in the bed next to mine received 3 sons, 7 grandchildren, and, I am not making this up, a small dog smuggled in under a coat. I, Saturnina Flores, founder of the Golden Button, the woman who once negotiated down the price of an entire fabric shipment through 3 hours of argument and sheer stubbornness, I had no clean socks. I started lying to the nurses. My daughter is traveling, I said. The store keeps her very busy. You know how it is. On day 10, the doctor signed my discharge papers and told me I needed rest and assistance at home. I nodded. I told him my son-in-law was on his way, just stuck in traffic. I waited until the nurse's station was looking the other way. Then I got dressed in the same clothes I had arrived in 10 days before, a wool skirt now wrinkled beyond saving and a blouse with a dried blood stain on the side, and I hobbled to the front entrance on a walker. I lifted my hand in the afternoon air and flagged a taxi. The driver was an older man with a grey mustache who helped me into the back without being asked. He was kinder to me in 30 seconds than my daughter had been in 10 days. When the taxi turned onto my street, I saw it. The metal shutter of the golden button was pulled down. Closed. On a Tuesday at 4 in the afternoon. And taped to the glass in rough handwriting was a sign. Closed for liquidation. Rogelio's car was parked in the driveway, but facing outward, with the trunk open, pointing at the door like an animal ready to run. I paid the driver. Refused his help getting out. Walked to my own front door with the walker scraping against the pavement. The lock had been forced slightly, or maybe just left careless in someone's haste. I found my keys in the bottom of my hospital bag, where they'd been the whole time. I opened the door. The smell hit me first. Stale air. Cold pizza. Neglect. Then the sight. The hallway full of cardboard boxes stacked in uneven towers. I recognized everything inside them. My Bavarian porcelain. My hand-embroidered tablecloths. My father's collection of antique clocks. Written on the boxes in thick black marker. Sale. Trash. Rogelio. I heard them upstairs. Laughing. That lamp is worth at least 3,000. Rogelio's voice boomed through the ceiling. Pack the jewelry before we run out of time. And Brenda, hurry up. The moving truck guy is coming at 5. No hesitation in her voice. No grief. No guilt. Just urgency. I understood it all in that one moment with the clarity you only get when everything becomes suddenly, horribly simple. They hadn't left me at the hospital to manage things while I healed. They had left me there to get me out of the way. They thought the fall was the beginning of the end. They assumed I would go from the hospital to a nursing home and from the nursing home to a grave. And they intended to have the house emptied and sold before anyone thought to ask questions. 10 days. That's all they had given my 40 years of work. 10 days to become rubble. The fury that rose in me was volcanic. Red and total. But I had been a businesswoman for half a century, and I knew one thing more important than anything else. The person who loses their temper loses the negotiation. I did not call out to them. I did not cry. I set my walker down quietly. I found a wooden chair, one of the few pieces of furniture they hadn't moved yet, and I dragged it to the kitchen. With difficulty, wincing against the pain, I crouched behind the counter and plugged the telephone cord back into the wall socket. I had disconnected nothing. They had. I waited for the dial tone. It was there. The bill was tied to my credit card, the one I had always paid on time, because that is what responsible women do. I called Licenciado Anselmo Trevino. My notary. My old ally. A man of habits and loyalty, like me. Anselmo, I said when he answered. It's Saturnina. My voice came out rough, barely recognizable. I need you to listen carefully because I don't have much time. I'm in my house. I just left the hospital. I have a broken hip. My daughter left me there for 10 days and right now she and her husband are upstairs loading my belongings into boxes to sell. The sound of a chair being pushed back fast. Anselmo standing up. Saturnina. My God. Rogelio came to my office yesterday asking for a copy of the property deeds. Said you had misplaced them. Said you needed them urgently for an insurance claim. My chest tightened. You didn't give him anything. Of course not. I told him I needed you present or a recently notarized power of attorney. He nearly put his fist through my desk. I closed my eyes for a second. I still had allies. Loyalty still existed somewhere outside my own blood. Anselmo. Come now. Bring your son, the officer. Bring the revocation document, the original. What revocation? 3 years ago. After a bad fight with Brenda. She screamed at me that I was losing my mind. I went to your office the next day and drew up an act, revocation of all powers, and a life usufruct clause with a conditional inheritance provision. You remember. You told me it was very severe. A long pause. Then, I remember. You signed it and never filed it publicly. I know. I got weak. I wanted to give her another chance. My jaw tightened. I'm done giving chances. Bring everything. Come now. I hung up. Then I sat in that chair and I waited, with my hands folded over my walking stick and the document in my blouse, because I had found it. Hidden exactly where I had hidden it 3 years ago, in the false compartment beneath the foot treadle of my old Singer sewing machine, the one my mother had left me, the one these thieves hadn't touched because it was heavy and old and in their estimation worth nothing. In that same hidden space, a velvet pouch. Blue. Heavy. 50 gold coins, centenarios, one purchased per month for 30 years. My true retirement fund. The money they would never find in any bank account because I never trusted banks the way I trusted old iron and solid wood. I had gathered both from that compartment, tucking the coins into my skirt pocket and the documents against my chest, while their footsteps thundered overhead. Upstairs, I had heard Brenda mention a notebook. I found it on the kitchen table when I went for water. Her handwriting. Pink ink. A list. Cell store inventory. 50,000. Jewelry. 20,000. Rogelio's car fund. 40,000 for down payment on new truck. House. Quick sale or mortgage. And at the bottom, underlined 3 times. Nursing home Santa Fe. 8,000 per month. That was my future in her handwriting. A cheap room with a shared bathroom, paid for with my own money, while they bought themselves a new vehicle. The tear that fell down my cheek was not sadness. It was pure, distilled rage. The last tear I would ever cry for Brenda. I heard them coming down the stairs, Rogelio first, grunting under the weight of my flat-screen television, eyes fixed on his feet. He didn't see me until he had already stepped off the last stair and turned into the entrance hall. He froze. The television tilted. His mouth opened in a silent, perfect circle of horror. Careful, I said. My voice was soft. Almost sweet. Like a knife wrapped in cotton. Don't drop my telenovela screen. It slipped from his sweating hands anyway. It hit the floor corner first with a crack of plastic and glass that echoed through the whole house. Brenda came around the bend seconds later, arms full of my fur coats, a box of my orthopedic shoes under her elbow, and stopped dead when she saw me. The coats fell from her arms. She gripped the banister like a woman on a sinking ship. "Mama," she whispered. "What are you doing here?" I said nothing for a long moment. I let them look at me. At this old woman in a blood-stained blouse, sitting in a hard chair in the wreckage of her own home, holding a walking stick across her knees like a scepter. When I spoke, I kept my voice warm. Gentle. The voice of a confused old grandmother who has no idea what's going on. What a surprise to find you working so hard," I said, looking around at the boxes with wide, blinking eyes. "The doctor gave me my discharge this afternoon. Just like that. Said they needed the bed. I had to come in a taxi, poor me. But look at you two, cleaning everything up so nicely for when I came home. What angels." I watched the panic on their faces transform into something worse. Calculation. They looked at each other. A fast, desperate exchange. The old woman doesn't know. She fell. She's confused. This might still work. Rogelio's shoulders dropped with relief. Yes, of course, Swigrita. We were going to go get you tomorrow morning. We just wanted the house to be tidy so you wouldn't trip on anything." "How thoughtful," I said, nodding slowly. "And the store?" I saw the liquidation sign on my way in. I was a little worried. "Sales," he said quickly. Incredible sales this week. We've been moving inventory like crazy. Business is booming. I smiled. I gripped the gold coins through the fabric of my skirt. You know, I said, leaning forward slightly as if sharing a secret, I had a lot of time to think in that hospital. And I think you might be right, Rogelio. Maybe it is time for me to let go. Let someone younger handle everything. I watched his eyes go bright with hunger. In fact, before my fall, I had taken out a large sum from the bank. In cash. I don't trust the machines, you know. Dollars and some old coins. I hid it here in the house, but with this knock to my head I'm having trouble remembering exactly where. Brenda inhaled sharply. Cash. How much cash, Mama? A lifetime of savings. But my memory, you know how it is. I think it might be behind the bathroom tiles upstairs. Or maybe in the basement, inside the old washing machine. I touched my temple, shaking my head with theatrical confusion. I just can't be sure. I watched the greed override everything else in them. The urgency to leave, to escape before someone came asking questions. Gone. Now they had a new mission. Find the money. Stay. Don't worry, Mama. Brenda was at my side in an instant, touching my arm with a tenderness so fake it made my skin crawl. We'll look. You sit here and rest. Rogelio, check the upstairs bathroom again. I'll check the laundry room. They scattered like startled birds. Rogelio disappeared through the basement door. Brenda thundered up the stairs. And I sat in my chair, in the silence of my ruined home, and watched the clock on the wall. 12 minutes since my call. 13. Then, a car engine outside. A door. Footsteps on my front path. Rogelio burst out of the basement door, hands dusty with cobwebs, face flushed with excitement and the first shreds of suspicion. Someone's here, he said, moving toward the front door. Must be the moving contact. Wait, son, I said. He ignored me. He opened the door wide, ready to greet an accomplice. In the doorway, against the orange light of the evening sky, stood Licenciado Anselmo Trevino in his gray suit, briefcase in hand. And behind him, his son, Officer Ramirez, in full uniform, badge catching the last light of the day, with a face that announced nothing good. The air went out of Rogelio in one audible rush. He stumbled backward over his own feet. Anselmo didn't look at him. He looked past him, directly at me, and took in the disaster of the hallway, the boxes, the broken television, the stripped walls, before his eyes settled on me in my chair. Dona Saturnina, he said, removing his hat. I came as soon as you called. I can see we arrived just in time. I stood. Slowly. The pain bit my hip like a trapped animal, but I stood without help. I straightened to my full height. Brenda appeared at the top of the stairs at the sound of his voice. She looked at the lawyer. She looked at the uniform. She gripped the banister with both hands. Mama, she said. What is this? I walked toward them. My walking stick marked the rhythm on the floor. Knock, 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 like a judge's gavel calling a courtroom to order. This, I said, stopping 2 meters from my daughter, is the end of the performance. I reached inside my blouse and removed the envelope. I placed it on top of one of the boxes marked sale and pressed my palm flat against it. 3 years ago, Brenda, after you screamed at me that I was losing my mind, I went to Anselmo's office the very next morning. I drew up an act revoking every authority I had ever given you. A life usufruct clause. A conditional inheritance provision. You cannot sell this house. You cannot sign my name. You cannot touch a single tile in this building without my written permission. I held her gaze. And any attempt to do so is grounds for complete and permanent disinheritance. The color left Brenda's face so quickly it was like watching someone blow out a candle. That's impossible, she stammered. You never filed it. It doesn't. Licenciado, I said without looking away from her. Please. Anselmo opened his briefcase and produced the folder. The document is valid, notarized, and fully enforceable, he said in his most professionally devastating tone. Furthermore, what Officer Ramirez and I are observing here, the boxes, the liquidation sign, the removal of property, the abandonment of the homeowner during a medical emergency, falls under several specific legal provisions. Abuse of trust, theft, abandonment of a vulnerable person. Rogelio made one last attempt at bravado, stepping forward with the bluster of a cornered man. We have rights. We've lived here 5 years. You can't just. You have 30 minutes, Officer Ramirez said. His voice did not invite discussion. Personal clothing and toiletries only. Nothing that belongs to the Senora. I will supervise personally. Rogelio looked at the officer. He looked at Anselmo. He looked at me. Then he looked at the floor. I reached into my skirt pocket. I pulled out the blue velvet pouch and untied it slowly. I poured a handful of gold coins into my palm and held them up in the light, where they caught the last warmth of the sun coming through the doorway. 50 months of saving. 50 years of work. 50 pieces of proof that I had never needed anyone to take care of me. Brenda's eyes fixed on the gold with a hunger so naked it was almost pitiable. She took one step forward, hands reaching toward the coins like a child toward candy. "Mama," she breathed. "That's a fortune. We could fix everything. We could." I closed my fist. "No," I said. "This is mine. Every single coin. 30 years of saving them, 1 per month, while I was still wearing shoes with the soles repaired twice. You will not see a single gram of this gold." They went upstairs. Officer Ramirez followed them, making sure nothing left in those suitcases but what belonged to them. I sat back down in my father's chair and waited. 30 minutes later, they came down with 3 large bags and the hunched posture of people who have run out of arguments. Rogelio kept his eyes on the floor. Brenda stopped beside me for a moment. I thought she might say something real. One honest thing after a decade of performance. "Mama," she started. "I am not your mama," I said, staring at the open door. "I am Senora Saturnina. And this is my house. Goodbye." She went out into the street crying. He dragged the luggage and didn't look back. Officer Ramirez watched them drive away and then came back to close the door. The sound of the bolt sliding home was the sweetest music I had ever heard. I sat in the silence for a long time. Everything hurt. My hip, my chest, my history. But the air in my lungs felt clean for the first time in years. I reached into my pocket and squeezed 1 gold coin until the cold metal warmed in my hand. I had won the house back. But the harder work was still ahead of me, rebuilding myself from the rubble of a mother's broken trust. That night I slept on the downstairs sofa under a wool blanket I rescued from a box marked trash. My body ached. My home was a disaster. But I slept deeper than I had in 5 years, with the quiet certainty of someone who has survived the shipwreck and made it to shore. The next morning at 8 o'clock, Anselmo arrived with a locksmith, fresh coffee, and sweet bread. While the locksmith drilled the new locks into place, a sound like music, we sat at the kitchen table I had already scrubbed clean in the small hours of the night. "They'll try to challenge it," Anselmo told me, dunking his bread into his coffee. "They'll claim mental incapacity. It's the first weapon people like them reach for." "Let them try," I said calmly. "I have the hospital records of 10 nights spent alone. I have Nurse Gladys. I have my own clear mind and this." I tapped the velvet pouch on the table. "Gold pays for the best lawyers, Anselmo. Even better than you, if you're not careful." He laughed so hard the spoon rattled in his cup. 3 days later I hired Matilda, a sturdy no-nonsense woman recommended by my doctor. When she arrived for her interview and surveyed the half-reorganized chaos of my home, I told her plainly, "I'm not looking for a daughter. I already had one and she cost me a fortune. I'm looking for a professional. I pay well. I demand loyalty. And I need someone who knows when to be quiet." She looked me in the eye, nodded, and put on her apron. In 3 days the house was transformed. The smell of betrayal was replaced by lavender and wood wax. The broken television went to the garbage and a larger one took its place. And the liquidation sign on the golden button was torn down by my own hand on the morning I returned to my store. My employees Carmela and Don Jacinto were standing outside with faces long as a funeral. When they saw me coming down the street with my walking stick and my wine-colored suit, Carmela burst into tears. "We thought you weren't coming back," she said. "My son-in-law is a fool and my daughter is a thief," I said loud enough for the neighboring shopkeepers to hear. "And I am the owner of this store, and as long as I am breathing, that shutter goes up every day at 9 o'clock. Now open it." The consequences for Brenda and Rogelio arrived steadily, the way justice tends to, not all at once, but in a steady grinding current. The down payment on the truck was already gone. Their rental deposit bounced. Messages filled my voicemail, rage first, then threats, then finally, "Mama, we're living in a motel. I'm hungry." I listened to each one while drinking my chamomile tea in the evenings. Then I pressed delete. Did it hurt? Yes. She was my daughter. She was my blood. But then I would remember the 10 nights alone in that hospital bed with no clean clothes and a stained blouse. And I would press delete. I saw them once more, by accident. Coming out of Sunday Mass, leaning on my walking stick, which I now carried more for elegance than necessity. They were across the street at the bus stop, waiting. Both of them thinner, grayer. The expensive clothes were gone. Rogelio had lost the arrogance that used to occupy the room before he walked in. Brenda saw me and took a step toward the curb, her eyes filling with that terrible, hopeful shine of someone who has run out of other options. I raised my chin. I adjusted my silk shawl. And I got into the taxi Matilda already had waiting. I gave them nothing. Not even a wave. Because silence is the final price of betrayal. My life now is quiet, but it is full. I sold some of the gold coins, not because I needed the money for survival, but because I had denied myself too many things for too many decades while saving for an inheritance that was being stolen before I was even dead. I painted the house a deep, joyful yellow with white window frames. I filled the garden with bougainvillea. I hired a young manager for the store and taught him everything I know. I travel with a group of divorced and widowed women who, like me, discovered that life does not end when your children disappoint you. In Oaxaca, on a hotel terrace watching the sun set red over ancient ruins, I held my last gold coin, the one I keep as a charm now, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Full, uncomplicated, self-earned peace. I thought of Brenda. Of the grief of losing her, not to death, but to greed. And I understood that losing her had been necessary to find myself again. To stop being the old woman who existed only as a source of money and comfort. To become again what I had always been. Saturnina Flores. Businesswoman. Survivor. Owner of her own destiny. To every woman my age reading this, do not give away your kingdom while you still breathe. The love of children should be free, but respect is not automatic and your estate is not their inheritance until you decide it is. You are not old furniture to be moved to a corner. You are the foundation of the house. And if they try to tear you down, fall so loudly that the whole world shakes. I am Saturnina Flores. They broke my hip. They broke my heart. But they could not break what I am. And here I stand, walking stick in one hand, reins of my life in the other, watching the sun come up every morning, just for me.